This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And this is our episode on the best Star Wars books of 2023. I have my producer, Devore, with me, and I hope that as you're listening to this episode, you also think about your favorite books and writers from the year. And let us know what those are. But first, enjoy our picks for the best books of the year. What a year.
Correct.
What a year in general. What a year for Star Wars books and Star Wars in general. It's been a great year and kind of a weird year, but in terms of Star Wars books, it's been fantastic.
It really has.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, we need to acknowledge something that has happened.
Go on.
Well, we don't normally talk about current events on the show. We need to acknowledge that on our last episode, which you were also on, we did a book Q&A. And in this book Q&A, we talked about how there aren't a lot of books, especially in canon, set between episodes 1 and 2, the movies. And that episode came out last week. And it was all good and fine. And then Star Wars Books said, but what if we announced a new book about Mace Windu set between episodes 1 and 2?
We manifested it, baby.
And that's exactly what happened. Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss by Stephen Barnes is coming out next summer. This summer, next summer. I don't know, the 2024 summer time. And I'm very excited about it. And the cover is probably one of the best Star Wars book covers I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous cover.
I saw this announcement and I just laughed because I was like, literally, we just talked about this.
Yep.
Well, that's why I wanted to acknowledge it because, hey, there's a new Star Wars book coming out. Well, there are new Star Wars books coming out before that one. But now we know of Star Wars book releases through August, I suppose. So that's fun. But we're not really here to talk about 2024 Star Wars publishing. We'll get to that. Today we're here to talk about Star Wars books from 2023. This is the episode where we kind of talk about, we call it the best Star Wars books of 2023, but it's really our favorites because best is determined by what we liked the most. And, you know, we picked some categories that we're going to go through. And individually, we went off and we came up with our own bests for those categories. Some of them were hard. Some of them were very easy. But one thing I did want to acknowledge before we start is we don't really touch on comics. We're not going to touch on comics in this kind of best of list. And that's not because Star Wars comics aren't important. It's not because I don't like them. We don't like them. It's not anything to do with that. It's the fact that we haven't really been keeping up with the comics enough to really, especially this year, to be able to say what the best was because we haven't read enough of them. I would like to who have had a wider experience of having read different comics to be able to pick which ones I thought were great. Couldn't really justify doing that this year, but I promise, as we'll talk about in an upcoming episode, we'll be able to talk a lot more about comics at the end of 2024 and really give the artists and the writers and everyone involved the love and appreciation they deserve. We just couldn't do it this year, and I'm sorry about that. But I know that there were a lot of good comics this year, and we're going to try to make sure that we highlight them next year. Didn't quite get to them this year, but that's why we don't have a comics category. I just wanted to acknowledge that because I feel not great about it, but it's kind of just, it is what it is, All right. So I figured we could start. Do you want to go through just what all the categories are?
Yes.
And
I can do
then
that.
we will go through what our picks were, kind of why we liked them. You want to just read through the categories?
Yes. So we've got a bunch of categories. We're doing this in kind of classic award show format. Wanted to do something a little bit different and interesting, not just be like, picking our 3 favorites or whatever.
Right.
Jazz it up a little bit. So the categories that we've got best middle grade, best young adult, best adult book. We've got categories for best short story, best debut author, best audiobook, best cover. And then finally, we've got our of the years. So we've got the character of the year, the author of the year, and the book of the year. And again, just to reiterate what Meg said, because again, we're doing this in kind of award show format, we've got, we're using the label of best, but the best is really just reflecting our personal preferences here.
Yeah.
So we're not doing some kind of objective evaluation of, some claims about like, this is, this book or whatever is objectively, quote unquote, better than the other books that came out.
Yeah.
This is just reflecting the things that really hit us, resonated with us, we really enjoyed.
Yeah. This is not based on like ratings, what the audience thinks. And I want to incorporate more of the audience's thoughts and opinions next year. But again, this is the first time we're doing this. I honestly don't have a big enough reach to kind of be able to get a lot of audience opinions, especially now, because it's a little too late for that. But we'll give you more of a I want to hear more of your thoughts next year. Again, we're trying this year. I want to see how we do. But this is literally just our opinions, not how the community feels. So don't get mad at us. This is just what we liked. Also, hello, welcome back to the show. I didn't technically introduce you, even though I did in the intro. But once again, for like the 7th time or whatever it is, welcome back.
Thank you.
Wonderful producer.
Always happy to be here.
Okay, who wants to go first?
I can go first.
You go first.
All right. So for our first category that we introduced, which is the best middle grade Star Wars book of 2023, I gave my award to Star Wars Hunters Battle for the Arena by Marco Shiro.
So did I.
Look at that. Hey.
I wondered. I figured we'd probably have some more in common than we would if we were doing space movies.
Yes, exactly. I think we'll probably have a decent amount of overlap on this list.
Okay, one of the reasons, there are a lot of reasons I picked this book. One of them is because you all slept on it and no one talked about it.
Correct. Now, you all slept on it for a semi-legitimate reason, which is that the game on which this is based is trapped in a waiting for Godot-esque limbo in which most of us in the world are simply waiting by the side of the road, and we keep being told Star Wars Hunters is not here today, but it'll come tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it never shows up.
Yeah, we just recently got another delay announcement. They're working on it. I appreciate that they want to make it the best game possible when it comes out. I do appreciate that more than it being rushed. I don't want anyone overworked. I want y'all to take as long as you need. I'm not mad. But also, I'm not super sure why this book still came out, but I'm so glad that it did.
Yeah, this book is delightful. And I think you really can, as evidenced by our pick, you can enjoy it without the context of the video game. The book does a good job in terms of just giving you what you need to know about the video game characters to both like the characters and then be invested in this story.
Yeah.
So don't feel like, oh, I haven't played Hunters, I can't read this book.
Yeah.
You will get what you need to in this book. And it's a really wonderful book. I mean, yeah, you talked about like it got slept on, I think, for the Hunters reason. I think it maybe also got slept on. We may have talked about this in a prior episode, which is that I think for a lot of folks who are not, professional book reviewers, like who do this either vocationally or avocationally, I think we sometimes have a hard time figuring out exactly what to do with middle grade books.
Yeah.
because we're so far out of the demographic for which the book is intended that I think sometimes when talking about middle grade books, we tend to ascribe adult book categories and criteria onto them when it really doesn't work. That's not what the book is tended to function. So there's sometimes I think with some of us who just kind of do this for fun, there is a little bit of trying to fit the square peg into the round hole when we talk about middle grade books. But yeah, I listened to this book, which doesn't mean I read it because audiobook is a valid form of reading.
Yay.
And I thought it was delightful. I really loved the story. I love the message, which is all about, self-acceptance and, fitting in, like trying to find a group of people and friends where you belong. It's a really good book. So really check it out. Yeah. If you've got a young person in your life, a kid, a cousin, whatever, a sibling, and you want to get them into Star Wars books, I think this is a great way to do it because it doesn't really make a lot of assumptions about you knowing a lot about the Star Wars universe.
Exactly. I love
it.
That.
It is kind of a self-contained book. Yeah. So I think it's a really great entry book also if you have a kid that you want to get into Star Wars or you want to get them into Star Wars books, you can give them this. Yeah. So really good book. And yes, you all slept on it. Go read it.
Yeah. And shout out to Marco Shiro, the author of the book, who I interviewed on the show earlier this year about the book. So I will link to that episode or scroll back a little bit to March, I believe. Find it. One of my favorite interviews from this year. Absolutely delightful. And getting to hear more about how this book happened. And just amazing. So go listen to that too when you're done with this. And maybe that will get you to read the book. The other thing about this book is that it made me want to play the game. So I think it works both ways. But definitely, like you said, you may not have played the game yet. Most of us have not. But you should read the book. It's not a video game novelization more so as it's like an introduction to it's kind of like a universe within the universe because it's a lot of world building in terms of like what is this arena? Yeah. Like how does this work? But also set in the larger Star Wars universe, and it takes place during a specific time period in the universe, all that. So it's a valid book. It's a good book. You may have missed out on it, but I'm telling you right now, you gotta fix that. Well, this is great. We started off with a common pick. Let's see how many more times that happens.
All right, I'll introduce the second category, and then you can go first. So our next category is the best young adult Star Wars book of 2023.
Tales of Light and Life.
Oh, okay.
It is technically a young adult book. This is the short story High Republic collection, the first High Republic short story collection that they've done. One of the many things I loved about this is every High Republic author, including Alyssa Wong, who technically hasn't had a book come out that's High Republic yet, but that's January. Every single author got to have a voice, to have a story. And there were a lot of them, and they don't like fit together. They're not like one story fits into another one, like timeline wise or whatever. But it's really what it does is, it builds up to phase 3, but in some cases fun, other cases this is terrifying, but also in a good way. In a way where you're like, because it takes place across, phase 1, phase 2. Leading right up to phase 3. I need to read that story again now that phase 3 started, but I really enjoyed it. I loved everything about it. The stories were very different from each other in tone, all of that. All different characters, all characters that you already love, new characters. And I liked getting to see like every author back to back kind of like telling their own story within the High Republic. It was really, really fun because you see it across the High Republic, but not like one right after the other like that very often. Yeah. And the fact that they were able to do this and come together and build this thing. Another book that I don't think it's High Republic, so it got more attention than Battle for the Arena, for example, but still not enough because it's young adult, because it's a short story collection. But if you haven't read it, you don't have to read it before you start phase 3 or anything like that. There's nothing like super vital that like you have to know what happens before you get to it. But I still highly, highly recommend. We were going to do an episode on it for the show this year. Didn't happen, but we will still get to it. Please read it. I loved it.
An excellent pick. I did not realize it counted as YA.
It does, yeah.
All right, so my pick for the best young adult Star Wars book of 2023 is Cavan Scott's Path of Vengeance.
Hey!
The closing book of Phase 2 ends Phase 2 in spectacular, dreadful fashion.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I love the way that it, brought all of the stuff on Dowell and such to a kind of conclusion, and how it wrapped up, the stories, the story of the path and everything, but then also giving us sort of those crumbs going into beyond Phase 2. Yeah.
It's a very, very good book. There were not a ton of YA books to choose from this year.
Mm-hmm.
There were 3.
Correct.
So the pool was not very large, but we hit 2 of them. And Path of Vengeance, I want to read it again because I really, really, really enjoyed it. But, having once again started Phase 3, I want to go back and see where Phase 2 kind of leaves off in the books. Plus, Cavan Scott he just nails it every time. A story in Tales of Light and Life, also very good, but. It's a really good book. It's very dark.
Yes.
So if you like that in your Star Wars books, there you go. That's a good pick.
All right. Our third category is the best adult Star Wars book of 2023. So my pick for the best adult book is Inquisitor, Rise of the Red Blade.
Yay, me too.
By Delilah S. Dawson.
Yay. I struggled with this one. It was
this
between
one's a hard one, yeah.
It was between this and Cataclysm for me.
Okay.
Because I loved both of those books. Red Blade just had this effect on me where I really felt everything that the main character felt, and it made me, one of the reasons I ended up picking this book is because it made me think a lot deeper about Star Wars, about the Jedi, about that era and things that are going on, and the Clone Wars, and that deeper question of why do some Jedi turn away, and why do they make the choices that they make, and things like that. It was so great to have Delilah Dawson back in the universe. It had been a while, and what a way to come back.
Yeah, this was just an amazing book. I mean, telling this really sweeping story going from really pre the Clone Wars, through the Clone Wars, into the early Empire, following this one character and their struggles as a Jedi and their subsequent turn to the dark side, and then their career as an Inquisitor. We mentioned this on the last episode we were on. I was talking about how every time we get a new Inquisitor story, they still do manage to do something fresh and original with it. Yeah. And Delilah S. Dawson really does that in this book, in giving us this unique perspective of why would a Jedi voluntarily want to join up with the Inquisitors.
Right. And this was an instance that's very rare for me these days, where I didn't get to Order 66 and go, not again.
Yeah.
Because the way that it's done in this book is very, very good. And that's not a spoiler. It's going to happen.
It snuck up on me.
Yeah.
I was not expecting it to happen when it did.
Yeah.
It just really hit me oh, we're already here.
Yeah.
Whoops. Yeah. Oh, it's happening.
The pacing of this book, that's what it does. It's so good. It is so good. And you because you need to have all that lead up to kind of build her character and show why do you get to this turning point? And then you get there and it's rapid fire, all these things happen, and it's so good. And then the tie into the comic.
Yes.
It's so good. It's such a good book. Very good and well-deserved pick for this category. And I'm going to plug another interview that I've done for the show. Shout out to Delilah S. Dawson for coming onto the show and talking to me about this book and being very forgiving that Phasma is no longer in my top 5 because of this book. Appreciate the understanding. Oh, great.
right, fourth category, from which there were a lot to pick this year, was Best Short Story.
Shout out to, from a certain point of view, Return of the Jedi for giving us 40 short stories.
Correct.
Plus the others that we got.
Yeah,
there were a lot of short stories to choose from, and I struggled to pick my favorite. I'm going first.
yes, go ahead.
Struggled to pick my favorite because they're like both outside and within FacPov. There were so many good short stories. Like, so many came to mind. I was like, oh, what about this one? Oh, but I loved this one. And this one changed my life. I mean, not really, but maybe. But ultimately, I had to pick one.
Yep.
And I had to pick the one that I have actively gone back to and listened to again multiple times because I loved it so much. You might already know what my pick is. I had to go with The Chronicler by Danielle Page from FacPov, Return of the Jedi.
Very nice.
As a journalist, I had to. But that's actually not why I picked it. Because there were a couple other stories I was really kind of changing up between and trying to figure out what I wanted to pick. But the reason I ended up going with this one is because it really made me think in a much deeper way than I wanted to. It really kind of messed with my head a little bit. It made me think about, like, in something like a major event in the world, whether it be war or anything else, it made me think about, like, who gets to tell their stories?
Yeah.
Who gets to be remembered? And, like, man, that, like, because it made me think, like that, like, I'm sorry, but how dare a short story in a FacPov book do that to me? But that's why I picked it. Fantastic work. I think about this story a lot, and I will continue to think about it for a long, long time.
An excellent pick. Yeah, and you're right. Yeah, that's a really good story about, this question about history and memory and how are these events, chronicled, I guess.
Yeah.
The chronicler, like, what perspectives do you get on these major events? Which is, in some ways, it being within from a certain point of view is like a little bit meta, because so much of the conceit of the whole project is here you get the perspectives on these big events from these sort of side characters.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought that was a really good one in terms of following this character who is meeting our kind of main heroes and is then trying to capture their stories while all these big things are happening.
Yeah. I love it.
All right, my pick. So, as we've established, this was a big year for Star Wars short stories, between From a Certain Point of View, Tales of Light and Life, other short stories that were published in Insider and so on. So there was a lot to pick from. And yet, for me, it was very easy to figure out what pick I wanted, because I thought, again, a lot of great Star Wars stories, a lot of ones that really hit. But for me, there was one that just rose above all of them. A Closed Fist Has No Claws by Tessa Gratton.
Yeah, that is another short story I've continued to think about after I read it. That one messes with you.
That one and Screecher's Reach from Visions. Star Wars owes me therapy bills for both of those stories in 1 year.
Oh, man.
Like, a Star Wars... A Closed Fist Has No Claws is, I think it is up there among the great Star Wars short stories that we've gotten in recent years. Yeah. It is, as you said, it is haunting. It is an emotional gut punch. It, for me, established Marta Rowe as quite possibly the High Republic's most interesting character.
Yeah, for sure.
She's so complex in terms of her emotions and her motivations, and just getting to see her past Phase 2 and getting to follow that, this character, like, you see what happens to a person who, they put their faith and their commitment towards this cause, and they were sincere about it, and they were misled and misused by a bad actor.
Yeah.
And what happens to that kind of person afterwards?
Yeah.
And how do they deal with that? And the decidedly unhealthy, problematic ways with which Marta Rowe deals with that.
Yeah.
As you said about tales in general, none of these are, required reading in terms of being able to follow along with the kind of big picture story of the High Republic. But I think this plus Eye of the Storm, the comic book miniseries, I think are really huge if you're somebody who wants to follow, in particular, the Rowe lineage.
Yeah.
And understanding how you kind of get to Marchion Rowe and the Nile and what they're doing and why they're doing it. Yeah. I think this is a really important piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, it is. Oh, I want to read it again now.
I do too.
Yeah, I haven't revisited it yet, but I want to. That's how good it is. It's like, it's a good story when you want to go back and read it again. Fantastic pick.
All right, our next category here is Best Debut Author. So we've had a lot of returning authors, of course, in 2023, but we've also had some new folks joining the crop, getting to tell their own stories and enter the world and potentially tell more stories in the upcoming years. Yeah. And so we wanted to acknowledge our best/favorite debut author for 2023.
Yeah, and it was hard because when we came up with this category, we were like, oh, Sam Maggs. No, because Sam Maggs did a short story in a Fact Pop book. Margo Shiro also did a story.
I know. I know. We come up with these categories. I immediately worked on. I was like, oh, Cataclysm, Lydia Kang. And I was like, shoot, Empire from a certain point of view. She's already done one.
Yep. So we had to go to the place we didn't really want to go for this one. We had to go to Fact Pop.
I mean, it was the place you kind of have to go. Yeah. So,
but I don't know who you're gonna pick for this one.
Okay.
Who's going?
I think it's up. Oh wait, no, I am.
Yeah,
first
you're
this
first.
time.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, for the Best Debut Author Award for writing a very emotional and heartfelt story about a character who you did not expect to be included in this volume, I gave it to Mr. Adam Lance Garcia.
Same here. Yay! I feel like I had to clap for that one. Shout out to Adam for, first of all, writing a fantastic story about a character that none of us expected to be in Fact Pop Return of the Jedi. But you made it work. You made it a great story. You made me really invested in Dex, who he was okay before, and now I'm like, oh, and it was a great story, emotional story. That's only one side of it for me. It's your passion for Star Wars, and it's how much you love the franchise, how big of a fan of the books you are, which I learned in our interview that we did on the show. But it's how much you just are so happy to be in this universe. And you know what? All these authors are. But you just are your enthusiasm is really it for me in a lot of ways. And how much you love being here makes us love that you're here so much more. And there were a lot of great debut authors in this anthology, but Adam really stood out.
Yeah, it was just such a good story. Getting to see, like you said, the unexpected POV of Dexter Jettster, but getting him to see the celebrations that are happening when the Empire falls, and from the point of view of this character who now, thanks to really this is established in High Republic Phase 2, has lived many centuries.
Yeah.
And getting to see him be a little bit more jaded about this, where everybody else is celebrating the fall of the Empire, but then this person who has seen all of these different rises and falls happening throughout history being like, yes, it's a victory, but how long is it going to really last?
Yeah.
And then just getting to see him, blaming himself for the rise of the Empire, feeling like it was his fault for helping out Obi-Wan find Kamino, and him kind of dealing with some of that guilt and working through that and starting to kind of come out of that. and starting to find some of his faith and hope again, I thought was just really good.
It's such a good story. And it's like, again, you wouldn't think that this would be a story that you'd get, especially this late in the book. But it's perfect. It is perfect. This is one of the reasons I struggle to pick a short story, is because I wanted to pick this one. And there were so many great ones. But fantastic work. So happy to have you in Star Wars. And I cannot wait for the next Star Wars that you write.
All right, next pick was Best Audiobook. So you go first. What was your favorite / best Star Wars audiobook of 2023?
There were a lot of good audiobooks this year. Many of them narrated by Mark Thompson. Not all of them, many of them. But I had to go with the audiobook where we got a lot of different narrators, a lot of different voices, a lot of variety. And that would be, of course, Fagpaw of Return of the Jedi.
Excellent pick. I love it.
Yeah, I started listening to the audiobook, and about 2 minutes in, I was like, this may be the best audiobook of the year. And it was.
I love that. Any particular ones that you want to shout out from there?
If you haven't heard Mark Thompson voice a Sarlacc, I highly recommend. If you listen to no other short stories in this book, I think I'm not going to say anything. Just go listen to that one and let me know your thoughts.
Yes. Whatever you think it sounds like, it doesn't sound like that.
You're not ready. I was not ready. You're not going to be ready.
Yeah, I loved that one. I loved Sam Witwer's narration of the Palpatine story.
God.
So good.
Yeah, there were a lot of good ones.
Yeah, that was an excellent pick. I love that one. My pick for the best audiobook of 2023 goes to Cavan Scott's Path of Vengeance.
I knew you picked that one.
Yeah, and the reason that I picked it is for one particular moment that has just really stood out to me of just really good audiobook narration. And it is the sequence on Dalna when the path is underground in their cavern compound thing. And it is the whole sequence of the mother having her visions and then everything afterwards with Marta, and she hacks off Yana's arm and all of that. It was so just riveting, the narration, and you kind of felt the emotion of being in the crowd and everybody's just, getting caught up in their own emotions and in everything that's happening. It was just so good, and it just left such an impression with me that I could not pick Path of Vengeance. Yeah.
Have not listened to that audiobook because I think I read it before it came out. So got to do that. I'll do that. I'll do that soon. I think it'll be good. And yeah, that's what you mentioned to me when you read the audiobook, and I think I asked you what you thought of it. And that was one of the things you said, is that you mentioned that scene. Yeah. Who narrated that one?
I think that's a Mark Thompson narration.
Our dear friend Mark?
It's either Mark Thompson or January Lavoie, I think.
Both. Great narrators. There were so many good audiobooks this year. And there's so many good audiobooks in general. Listen to both of those, for sure.
Yes. All right. Next category, to acknowledge the artistic side of Star Wars publishing, is our pick for best cover.
I think it's you.
All right, so my pick for best cover, a little bit of a repeat, is Cavan Scott's Path of Vengeance.
Same.
This is, I think this is my favorite Star Wars book cover, just period.
Same. It's like once you look at it, like once you have it in front of you, you can't stop staring at it.
Yeah, it's very evocative. Yeah. It's got kind of this Renaissance painting quality where there's all these things happening, and you look at different ones like, oh, there's the Jedi in the back, and there's the Eye of the Nihil symbol, and hey, look, there's the Nameless coming out of the cavern. Yeah. There's so much happening that, yes, I absolutely love it.
And I'm not a huge fan of like a lot of the High Republic covers. Not just a lot of them don't like jump out at me, you know. But this one was very different. This one was like, oh, like I want to post it. Like as soon as I'm like, I want a poster of that on my wall, that's how I know it's good.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's the cover artist for this one? We're gonna look it up, and we're gonna include you in our little graphic. Because
shout out person.
you did a great job. I just didn't remember to look up who you are. But shout out to you, and you will get the recognition you deserve. I promise.
Yeah, it's really good. Even if you look at, they release a couple of the unused versions of that. Even those are really gorgeous.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta look at those.
Yeah. So yeah, Path of Vengeance.
Great work.
All right, now we get to our of the years, starting with our pick of character of the year.
We may have the same one.
It is possible.
Is your best character of the year a High Republic character?
It is not.
No.
Okay, so we don't have the same pick.
Martiro is my pick. Kind of like you were saying not that long ago. One of the most interesting characters I think that I've come across in the High Republic so far for me personally. And this year, having been in multiple stories, one of them being the short story that you picked as your best short story of the year. I need more. And we don't know if we're going to get more or in what capacity or what context. But I do, like my one, I'll call it a gripe with Phase 2 is there wasn't as much of it. And so we didn't get as much time with the characters, which story-wise it made sense. Like the story that we got was a story that we needed to get. But I would love more of Martiro, personally.
No, I do too. Yeah, I think she was the very close number 2 pick for me. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've already said some of my bits about Martiro, but yeah, I think the 2 big stories that we get with her in Path of Vengeance and then in A Closed Fist Has No Claws are just really good, and getting to follow her kind of inner journey and her evolution and how she ends up going from the path into starting the NIL. Yeah, I absolutely want more Martiro storytelling at some point. Get us an older Marta. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, my pick for character of the year, like I said, Martiro was nibbling on the heels. She was really close, but I ended up giving it to somebody else. For going from a comic book character that had absolutely not any real big significance or any background to becoming a fully fleshed out and compelling and fascinating character, I gave it to one Miss Iscata Karis.
See, that was my number 2.
Oh.
So I was choosing between these 2, and it was really, really hard. For good reason though. A character I very much related to in a lot of ways. And again, like you said, never expected to get like an entire like book about this character that was not in the comic for very long. And now is one of the most fascinating characters we've gotten in Star Wars publishing in a minute.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, I mean, there's of course the A plot, which is her journey from Jedi Knight and her fall to the dark side. But I think even the whole journey of self-discovery, which is something that I really related to, of her being from this species and she's never met anyone else like her, and she doesn't know where she comes from, and then learning where she comes from, and then going back to that place and finding her family. And then her sort of, particularly when she goes back as an Inquisitor, going there and then being like, yes, you're my family, my people, but by virtue of the choices I've made, I can't really come back here. There's not a life for me here. I think that is just, that also resonated on a lot of levels for me. Yeah, I think she's so interesting, and I mean, we're not going to get more stories with her, thanks to her boss. But no one loves killing Inquisitors more than their boss. So, but yeah, I think this was just a really, really good exploration, and yeah, had to give it to Olis Katakaris.
Yeah, it was. I almost picked her. Oh, yeah. It's tragic that we're not getting more of her, but what we did get with her, like we talked about before, fantastic.
All right, our second of the year, our author of the year. Who is it for 2023?
Ooh, who'd you pick for this one? I'm trying to guess.
All right.
I think I know.
I went for author of the year. Again, a lot of great picks across all the different genres and mediums of storytelling, new and returning authors. But once again, I had to give it to Miss Delilah S. Dawson for author of the year.
I love it. Well, I mean, for having, for returning after a minute and returning with this.
Yes.
Much deserved for sure. I think what's interesting about authors who have like more than 2 or 3 Star Wars books is to be able to like look back and watch like how much they've grown and how their stories have kind of evolved. Like even if they may be about different characters, like this is her best Star Wars book yet. And it's not her first, and it may not be her last. There's like there could be so much more to come, and like I love that. I love like that someone gets that chance. Like, of course, we always want to welcome new authors in, and we do that quite often, and it's good to see. But to be able to see someone like get more opportunities to do really, really good things and with really strong characters and very emotional and personal stories, I really, really enjoyed it a lot, and so glad to have her back. Having written a couple of my favorite Star Wars books of all time now.
Yeah.
Great pick. I picked Tessa Gratton as my author of the year.
Excellent pick.
Having gotten multiple stories from Tessa, and the level of emotion that these stories are at, and everything from getting very, very deep and at some points very, very dark. Like I said, emotional, and then there's the representation factor with certain characters, and you get you get a little bit of middle grade, and you get young adult, and all these characters at these different points in the High Republic. So glad that we have Tessa in the High Republic, and with more to come, with a solo novel coming at some point. I can't remember if it's next year or the year after that.
Yeah, it's next year.
It is next year.
Temptations of the Force?
Sweet.
Yes.
Oh, that title. But such strong work, and work that I continue to think about long after it's been published, between the short story and everything else. So glad to have you in Star Wars, have had you in Star Wars, and to get to have you in more Star Wars coming very soon.
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the run of new Star Wars authors that have been added within, like, let's say the last year or two, right, relatively recently, I think Tessa Gratton is the one that I am most excited by.
Yeah.
Just because they debuted in spectacular fashion with Path of Deceit. We just talked about A Closed Fist Has No Claws and the prospect of the upcoming stories in 2024. And I mean, I want to find their other non-Star Wars books. I really want to. I was probably a few weeks back or whatever. I was on Libby looking up the audiobooks, like the other Tessa Gratton books.
Yes.
Because, just the emotional, the evocative storytelling is just so strong that whenever I see, Star Wars story by Tessa Gratton, I'm just now like, that I want to get my hands on that as soon as possible. I want to read that.
Yeah. 2 very, very great authors. Great picks.
Yes. All right. And now our final pick. We are closing out our 2023 award show with, of course, Book of the Year.
Oh, the best book of 2023. Again, so many to choose from. High Republic, not High Republic. We got a short story collection in there. It's a lot. A lot happened in Star Wars publishing this year.
Correct.
There were a lot of great things most of the months of the year. From Battle of Jeddah all the way through the Eye of Darkness, and everything in between. I haven't counted yet, but I will do that. How many books actually came out this year? like novels. No, I mean, there were also reference books and things like that, but there were a lot of great ones to pick from, and it was very, very hard to choose. But I had to go with the book, actually, that was good on its own, but then had other media to kind of enhance it and make it even better and make me want to go read it again. And that was, of course, Jedi Battle Scars by Sam
Excellent
Maggs.
pick. Excellent pick.
Yeah, loved it. I loved how it was a book set between two video games, based on these characters, but finally, like, really, because it's a book, getting inside the characters' heads more and kind of really, like, seeing them, still, like, dealing with a lot of conflict, but kind of, like, between the bigger conflicts of the first game and the second game. And the book came out before the second game did. And, we're not talking about video games, unfortunately, on this podcast, but I will say probably one of my favorite Star Wars games that has ever come out in terms of story and everything else. And when that story finished, it just really made me realize, like, oh, that book, like, it may not be required reading. Like, you didn't need to read it to appreciate the game, but I'm so glad that I did. And I also wanted to go back and read it again. And Sam Maggs took, these video game characters and this one story that we had and just, like, completely made it her own thing in the best way possible. It's a very Sam Maggs book, and that's a good thing. And it is one I can't wait to revisit. And I hope we get more Sam Maggs Star Wars in the future.
Yeah, Battle Scars is such an excellent book. Yeah, getting to explore the dynamics of the Mantis crew and how they relate to one another. And like you said, it is not required reading in terms of going from Fallen Order to Survivor. You can pretty much follow what's happening in Survivor. I mean, it does explain, among other things, why Grease has a robo arm in Survivor. But again, it's not important to the story to know why Grease has a robo arm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it really enhanced the gameplay of Survivor because you get in Battle Scars, of course, them going on a mission and you get to see their own dynamics and stuff. And it ends on kind of this high note of them together. And then to go from there to Survivor and they've all gone their separate ways. Mm-hmm. And you're like, man, oh, like that hurts.
Yeah.
Again, it works just as effectively if you just hop from Fallen Order to Survivor. Right. But you having that middle story there was really good. It gave us some really good Mirren content because she's not really that big a part of Fallen Order.
Yeah.
She kind of comes in towards the latter end of the game, but that book really gets to spend a lot of time with her and seeing how she kind of feels like the black sheep in the group and how she's kind of dealing with her own trauma of what happened with the Night Sisters. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good book and cannot recommend it highly enough.
Yeah. Love it.
All right, my pick for book of the year. I had to do the sweep. Inquisitor Rise of the Red Blade.
It's so good.
It was hard because I was picking between two. It was going to be this one or it was going to maybe be Eye of Darkness just for the way that George Mann kicks off Phase 3 in such a spectacular fashion. But then what tipped it for me was I started thinking about, okay, in 2-3 years, if I'm asked to look back on 2023 Star Wars publishing, how am I going to think about it? And I just came to the conclusion, I'm going to think about it as the year that Red Blade came out. It's the defining book for me.
Yeah.
Again, we've talked about it ad nauseum on this episode already, but there's just so much going on in this book, from the personal story to telling an institutional story about the Jedi and their struggles at the end of the Clone Wars and how the war sort of erodes a lot of the bonds between the Jedi. And it is not a story that at the end of the day gives a very, I guess you could say, comforting moral. Yeah. There are morals to the story. There are lessons.
Yeah.
But they're ones that kind of sit with you uneasily.
Yeah.
I think in the episode that you did with Delilah, where you interviewed her, and she was talking about how one of the things that really stuck out for me from that interview was her talking about that one of the morals of the story is about how institutions will not always change for you.
Yeah.
That you might be a black sheep, you may not fit in, and you may want, whatever whatever community or whatever to fit in to accommodate you, is that you will try, and sometimes the answer you'll get back is no.
Yeah.
You will just get the answer of you don't belong here.
Right.
And that is both a reality, and that is also something that's very hard to sit with.
Yeah.
I mean, we started this whole conversation, this awards, with talking about Battle for the Arena, which is this story about finding community and finding your people.
Yeah.
But then Red Blade is the other end of the spectrum of like sometimes it is very hard to find your people, and sometimes you just don't find your people.
Yeah.
And that's a very uncomfortable, but it's also a true story. It's very much a real story. So I think it's a very complicated and complex book that you really have to sit with and think about the story that it's telling you, really grapple with the morals that it is passing along.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about the book a lot. And when I had Charles on to talk about the book not that long ago, we really got into a lot of it's not an easy book to read in that it really makes you, it really disappoints you.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it great.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because not every Star Wars story, not every story in general that you're gonna read is gonna give you leave you with good feelings. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and that doesn't mean it's not a good story. It just means it's a very real, hard-hitting story, and sometimes we need those. So shout out to Delilah for writing one of those, and I think it was good that we got it. I think we need more stories like that. It's not that we need fewer happy endings. It's just sometimes you need those stories that make you go, oh, yeah, that's very, very true and not awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah, I ultimately had to give it to Red Blade for that reason.
Love it. Both very good books. All very good books this year. I can't believe, it was so hard to pick in a lot of these categories because all of it was so good. And, shout out to everyone who had a book out this year or who worked on a book this year. There's a lot to think about, and there's a lot we've talked about, a lot we've thought about, a lot, and what I'm most excited for, I think, is seeing what we're going to get in 2024. We know a lot of it, but maybe not everything. But then who knows, and I like a little bit of mystery there. But this year was so good, and I can't believe it's over. I can't believe that we're done with Star Wars books for the year.
I know.
But that's it. We did the thing.
Yes, we did.
That was fun. We definitely
was.
have to do that again next year, and this is an experiment, and we will see. We'll see how it goes. Maybe keep track of things throughout the year. Maybe come up with some more categories. Definitely do some comics.
Yes, our goal is that when we do this time next year, we're gonna have a best comic category.
Yeah.
Because you deserve recognition, comic book authors.
Yes, you do. And we're so sorry that we didn't get to more comics. But as you'll hear in a few episodes from now, we're working on that. Along with that, we have talked about our favorite Star Wars books of 2023. There are a few more episodes left for you for the year. And I hope you listen to those too. And I hope that for those of you who listen to the show one episode or many episodes this year, thank you for doing that. Thank you for listening to our discussions, my interviews, different people's thoughts on Star Wars books and related things. It's been a fantastic year, and I cannot wait to see what 2024 has in store for Star Wars publishing and for all the authors and all the readers who love these books and can't wait to have more. Thank you for podcasting with me again.
My pleasure as always.
Tell the people where they can find you and all your Star Wars opinions on the internet.
All right. If you want to follow me on X, you can do so at A Large Review Pod. If you want to hear my other Star Wars opinions, you can listen to me over as a co-host on Clashing Sabers on their main show. You can also listen to me on Space Swifties, a Star Wars and Taylor Swift podcast that I co-host with you.
Happy 2023, everyone. Sure. Happy New Year-ish. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you liked this format, first of all, let me know. But also, I want to hear your favorites for the year. You know where to find all the things. I want to know. I want to know how many bests you had in common with us. What you loved from the year. This is a celebration of all of our favorite things from 2023, Star Wars book related. So thank you for listening to us, and as always, for listening in general. Can't wait for what's to come. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Mondum, and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed a podcast art. Keep up with the show on Substack at Now This Is Lit, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support the show, all the ways you can do that are in the description. For more book reviews and Star Wars book celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.